An FTK is when you win on your very first turn of the game, and generally in order to accomplish that goal, you need to draw through pretty much every card in your deck. Generic card draw on Yu-Gi-Oh! Is incredibly limited, where all of the best cards in this distinction are absolutely banned or heavily restricted. So in this larger video than normal, we're going to go over 20 of the best cards that can help facilitate drawing all the cards in your deck, since a lot of these cards do not work with each other, so it's nice to have a large variance of cards to look from. Starting us off at number 20, we have Memories of Hope. This card has the effect where you can draw cards equal to the number of Xyz monsters you control with different names, and has a hard once per turn. Now, the best way this card is combined is with Numerons, specifically using Numeron Network in order to special summon the 4 Numeron Gate cards from your extra deck. And since the Numeron engine only requires the field spell to work, you can actually add a Numeron package to a deck in order to just activate Memories of Hope a single time, because being able to draw 4 cards off of a 2-card setup is actually pretty good. But there is also the downside where you can only summon the Numeron cards that turn, plus one other time. So if you use this engine, you can't really use the other monsters that are generally part of FTK strategies, and generally monsters are part of the strongest parts of drawing cards through your entire deck, which is why it's only at number 20, along with a lot of other niche ones that we'll be going over in the bottom 10 spots. And at number 19, we have Stryker Mobilize Engage. This card has the effect where, if you have no cards in your main monster zones, and you have 3 more spells in your graveyard, you get to add a Stryker card from your deck to your hand and draw 1 card. So it's a pure +1 in card advantage if you have at least 3 spells in your grave, which you should have pretty easily with these kinds of decks. And the card you generally want to start off from your deck is Stryker Mecha Hornet Drones or Stryker Mobilize Linkage. That way you can use one of those to bring out Stryker Ace Kagari in order to recover Stryker Mobilize Engage to use the effect for a second time. And being able to use Engage twice is a +3 in card advantage, as you get 2 extra cards off of the double engages, and Kagari is a +1 with returning the card to your hand. However, the problem with this small engine is that if you've drawn through all of your Stryker cards before Engage, then you won't be able to use Engage at all because you have nothing to search, so you can't draw cards, which can be offset if you're running Magician's Souls and Illusion of Chaos engine in order to get one of those cards back into your deck so you can search it to draw more cards. And at number 18, we have Magical Stone Excavation. Now, this card technically doesn't draw any cards, because what it does is discard any 2 cards from your hand in order to add any spell card from your graveyard back to your hand. This card is an excellent tech option for FTK decks because you can use it to grab very powerful spell cards from your graveyard back to your hand, like Golden Bamboo Sword to draw 2 cards, while also getting cards in the graveyard that have great graveyard effects like Cursed Bamboo Sword or Metaphos Fusion, or just another spent hard once per turn card that you can't use anymore, like any extra copies of Memories of Hope you might have, since the card is a hard once per turn, and generally with FTK decks, you can only use hard once per turn cards a single time the entire duel. Although seeing as there are 17 other cards that can help you draw through your deck, generally Magical Stone Excavation isn't necessary, but it is always an option. And at number 17, we have Camoufrite. This is a pendulum monster which has the effect where if you have no monsters in your extra deck and this card is in your pendulum zone, you destroy this card in order to draw 1 card. Additionally, if it's in your extra deck and there's no cards in your extra deck besides it, you can special summon it from the extra deck, although just remember it would go to the extra monster zone since it's a face-up pendulum monster, or to a zone a link monster points to. Now, this card is basically a pure card neutral card that draws 1 card from your deck, which are generally some of the absolute best cards when it comes to FTK draws. However, it does require you to not play an extra deck, and as I already discussed with Engage and Memories of Hope engines, there's ways to use your extra deck in order to draw a lot of cards. But if your strategy does not care about the extra deck at all, then playing 1 copy of Camoufrite is an easy no-brainer decision. Or instead, you can play Link Apple, which also draws a card as long as your deck only has non-link monsters. As Link Apple allows you to reveal this card in your hand in order to banish a random card in your extra deck, and as long as the monster you banish is not a Link monster, you get to discard Link Apple in order to draw a card. But if it is a Link monster, then it special summons itself instead of drawing a card, which is not what you want to do in an FTK deck. So, if you have leeway with your extra deck, these 2 cards are great additions to FTK strategy. And at number 16, we have Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. When this card's normal summoned, you get to add a Spellbook card from your deck to your hand. Generally, what you do with this card is search out Spellbook of Secrets, which then allows you to search out Spellbook of Knowledge, which then allows you to send a Prophecy to the graveyard in order to draw 2 cards. So with a single Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, you go +1 in card advantage while cycling through 4 cards in your deck, which is an excellent way to dig deeper, all for the price of a single normal summon. Although therein lies the problem with this card, and that it does require a normal summon in order to get this engine off the ground. However, since you only play Secrets and Knowledge with Prophecy, generally it's kind of hard to draw into one of the Garnets, because you can just use Secrets to search out Spellbook Magician of Prophecy in order to search out Knowledge and basically accomplish the same thing. And you can use Knowledge in order to send either 2 cards to the graveyard from your hand in order to draw 2 cards as well. But in order to make best use of this engine, you do need your normal summon, which a lot of FTK strategies kind of need for other better cards. And at number 15, we have Foolish Burial Goods. This card allows you to send any spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard. If you simply send Metaphos Fusion to the graveyard, you can draw 1 card. However, it does return Metaphos Fusion to your deck, which means it doesn't necessarily help you thin your deck that much. Instead, you could use it to send Cursed Bamboo Sword to the graveyard or to search out one of the other bamboo cards to set up the much better engine we'll talk about later on in this video. But it can be used to send Metalfoes Fusion to the graveyard just by itself, which can be simply saved in the graveyard to be the condition to Stryker, Mobilize, Engage until you really need to draw a card later, as you don't have to use Metalfoes Fusion immediately. And at number 14, we have Triple Tactics Talent. This card can only be activated if your opponent activates a monster effect during your main phase, where you can use one of its 3 effects. In this case, we only care about the one to draw 2 cards. Now, seeing as there is a lot of hand traps in the game, generally, if you have one copy of Triple Tactics Talents, there's a good chance it'll always be alive in just a free pot of greed. However, as funny as this may be to say, a lot of FTK decks don't really account for interruption stopping their plays, and kind of bank on their opponent not having any hand traps in the first place. So they might completely forego playing this card and assume only a best case scenario. So technically it is super useful for these kinds of decks, but a lot of people will skip on using it just for more generic draw spells that are always live, because it does technically require your opponent to perform an action to be usable at all. And at number 13, we have Card Destruction. Although we'll also add Hand Destruction and Dark World Dealings because they all basically do the same thing. These cards all make you go -1 in order to discard cards from your hand in order to draw more cards from your deck. Card Destruction allows you to use your entire hand. Hand Destruction is 2 cards and Dark World Dealings is just 1, with each of them also applying the same effect to your opponent. Now, there are ways in order to turn these -1s into neutral or even pluses. If you get rid of Snow or Bro, they can be used in order to draw extra cards or search out extra Dark World cards from your deck respectively. Although these 2 cards are not triggered by Hand Destruction. Or they can be used with cards that we talked about earlier with Foolish Burial Goods section in order to send Cursed Bamboo Sword or Metalfoes Fusion to the graveyard for later card draws as well. And at number 12, we have Contract with Dawn Thousand. This is a continuous spell card which on activation makes both players lose 1000 life points and draw 1 card. Additionally, the card you draw is revealed, and if it's a spell card, you can't normal summon or set while that spell card is revealed in your hand. However, you can simply get rid of this restriction if you just use that spell card, so it's no longer revealed in your hand. The card is a hard once per turn, so generally you only want to play one of them, but basically Contract with Dawn Thousands just gives you a free card draw without really requiring any of the setup, with the only downside that your opponent also gets a draw, so they might also get a hand trap. And at number 11, we have Allure of Darkness. This is a spell card which allows you to draw 2 cards, then banish 1 dark monster from your hand. However, if you're not able to banish a dark monster, you have to instead send your entire hand to the graveyard. Now, this card technically is card neutral and doesn't actually let you go plus, but that's really good for these kinds of decks. And there are a lot of very good dark monsters that contribute to FTK strategies, like Magician's Souls, Illusion of Chaos, Summoner Monk, the Dark World monsters mentioned earlier, Dangers, Toon monsters search off of Toon Table of Contents, and this one card called Cyber Ouroboros, which has the effect that if it's removed from play, you get to cycle 1 other card, or you send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard to draw 1 card. So Allure of Darkness is very good for FTK strategies because of just how many monsters in FTK strategies are dark and how well it fits with drawing more cards from your deck without losing card advantage. But there is always a chance to completely get rid of your hand if you're just unlucky and have absolutely no dark monsters, which is enough of a detriment that some people choose not to play it at all, even if they can't afford to banish a dark monster for its effect. And at number 10, we have Performer Pal Popper Up. This card allows you to send up to 3 cards from your hand to the graveyard in order to draw the same amount. However, then you lose 1000 life points for each card in your hand. And not the amount of cards you drew, mind you. This card accounts all the cards in your hand when you lose life points, so it's very possible to lose more than 5000 life points if you have a pretty full hand. It is also only a hard once per turn. However, it allows you to cycle 3 cards through your deck by sending cards to the graveyard instead of back to the deck, making it stronger than cards like Magical Mallet or Reload, even though they technically -1 in card advantage as well for a similar effect, specifically because of cards I mentioned earlier with Foolish Burial Goods. In fact, the effect is so good that Perform Pal Popper Upper is kind of a staple in a lot of FTK decks. Sometimes even played at 3 copies, even though it's a hard once per turn. Although part of the reason why is because the drawback of losing life points is actually beneficial to some really good FTK strategy. So being able to cycle and contribute towards your FTK is better than only doing one of them. And at number 9, we have Card of Fate. This card allows for each player to choose 1 card from their deck, then combine it with 4 random cards from your deck, and you get to add 1 of those 5 cards to your hand at random. So basically, this card allows you and your opponent to draw 1 card from your deck, just without technically saying you're drawing a card, with just a higher chance of getting the card you need since you do get to pick 1 of the random 5 you choose from. However, this effect is actually incredibly good because the only downside it has is giving your opponent a card as well, and having a hard once per turn. Now, giving your opponent an extra card could be bad because it might give them a hand trap that can stop your combos, but generally it's worth it to take the risk for a free cycle from the deck. So playing the card at 1 copy is always just a pretty good option for drawing through your deck quicker. And at number 8, we have Toon Table of Contents. This card allows you to add any Toon card from your deck to your hand, and what makes this card so good for FTK strategies is it does add another copy of itself. So using 1 Toon Table of Contents can dig you through 3 cards in your deck, the other 2 copies of Toon Table of Contents plus the final Toon card that you search out. And with the addition of Toon Bookmark, you can dig 4 cards through your deck as you can end into a bookmark and then use Bookmark to search out your last Toon card. Now, the final Toon card you use when you use this engine varies heavily on what kind of FTK you're trying to perform. You can simply add something like Toon Mass Sorcerer in order to have a dark monster to banish for Allure of Darkness. You can have Toon Cannon Soldier in order to be the win condition for your FTK deck, or Toon Cyber Dragon in order to get rid of one of your opponent's monsters in the extra monster zone with Chimera Tech Mega Fleet Dragon. A single Toon table of contents allowing your deck to be 4 cards smaller is amazing. Even if the card it searches out technically don't let you draw more cards and just end up bricking your hand eventually. The fact that it allows you to make your deck so much smaller means it's seen play in all kinds of FTK strategies throughout the game's history. And at number 7, we have Magician's Souls. This card can special summon itself from your hand by sending a level 6 or higher spellcaster monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then while it's on the field, it has an effect to send up to 2 speller traps from your hand or field to the graveyard in order to draw the same number of cards. So you can use this in order to send a spent chicken game to the graveyard, one of the cards drawn off of Toon Table of Contents or Cursed Bamboo Sword, and it's an easy way to draw extra cards and occasionally go plus in the process. And it special summons from the hand, so you don't lose anything for doing it either. Additionally, with Illusion of Chaos, you can search the card directly from your deck as well as return itself to the deck, so you have a target to send to the graveyard to meet its condition, making it even easier to run than ever. And then you can ditch extra copies of Magician's Souls with Allure of Darknesses, since its effect is a hard once per turn and you won't need the extra copies. And at number 6, we have One Day of Peace. This card simply allows both players to draw 1 card, and then makes it so neither player takes any damage until the end of your opponent's next turn. This effect is so simple and good that it's limited to 1 copy per deck. However, the clause of making both players take no damage can actually go against a lot of FTK strategies, so if you're playing a deck that doesn't do burn damage for the win, it's basically an auto-include, but a lot of FTKs do win through burn damage, so it's kind of relegated to alternative win conditions like Exodia. And at number 5, we have Golden Bamboo Sword. This is a spell card that can only be activated if you control a Bamboo Sword equip spell, which allows you to draw 2 cards from your deck. Now, we talked about Cursed Bamboo Sword a lot already, and that's because Golden Bamboo Sword is so good that it's worth running the Bamboo Sword engine in order to draw cards. Cursed Bamboo Sword allows you to search out any bamboo card from your deck when it's sent to the graveyard, and it's not once per turn. It's also an equip card which doesn't do anything once on the field, but it does count as a Bamboo Sword equip card, so it allows you to activate the effect of Golden Bamboo Sword as well. For the most part, the standard Bamboo engine is just playing 3 copies of Cursed, Golden, and 1 copy of Broken Bamboo Sword, so you're pretty much good to go. Because as soon as you have the card set up, your most valuable target in the graveyard to bring back with cards like Magical Stone Excavation, A Feather the Phoenix, or Spell Reproduction is Golden Bamboo Sword, because it's an effortless +1 in card advantage. There's also the newly released original Bamboo Sword, which can help this engine out by searching out Cursed Bamboo Sword from the deck. And it's really hard to overstate just how good drawing 2 cards is, that you'd want to play something like Broken Bamboo Sword in your deck, which literally does nothing, just for the option of having your other 3 Golden Bamboo Swords in your deck live to use. And at number 4, we have Into the Void. This card can only be activated if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, where it simply allows you to draw 1 card. Then during the end phase, you discard your entire hand. Now, this card is a staple in pretty much all FTK decks because you're going to win on your first turn anyway, so losing your hand during the end phase isn't really a detriment. Also, the card doesn't have a hard once per turn clause, so you can play 3 copies of your deck if it's legal at 3, as the card is currently limited to 1 in the TCG. It's basically the perfect card for these kinds of decks, and the only reason you wouldn't want to play it is because of the condition to activate it, where having 3 or more cards in your hand sometimes doesn't happen, because a lot of other draw cards require you to go -1 to use their effects. And at number 3, we have Chicken Game. This is a field spell which allows you to pay 1000 life points to draw 1 card. The card is currently banned in the TCG, but still usable in Master Duel in the OCG. And the reason this card is better than something like Into the Void, which allows you to draw a card without paying life points, is because it's a field spell card, so it can be searched out from the deck with Terraforming in order to cycle 1 extra card from your deck. And the effect can be reused with Pseudospace to draw an additional card, and it can be sent to the graveyard with Magician's Souls to draw once more. There is the downside, where the person with the lowest life points doesn't take any damage while it's on the field, so you have to be careful with some burn-centric FTK strategies when using Chicken Game, as you can accidentally make your opponent immune to the burn damage you might want to inflict. Although Chicken Game is definitely one of the premier FTK cards for drawing through your deck, because of how much support it has for simply being a field spell card. And at number 2, we have Upstart Goblin. This card simply draws 1 card from your deck and gives your opponent 1000 life points. Now, with how good effortless +0 cards are, this card is also limited to 1 in the deck in the TCG, but unlimited in Master Duel in the OCG, so you can play 3 copies. And you probably should play 3 copies of this card, because it's an easy way to make your deck 3 cards smaller, in order to draw into your win condition. Although the card does have the potential to give your opponent an extra 3000 life points with the effect, but what's funny about this card is that it's so good, it's still played in strategies that try to win through burn damage, because they just account for the extra life points your opponent has when trying to pull off their win condition. So unless you're playing an FTK which can only deal 8000 points of damage, you still want to run Upstart Goblin because of just how good it is for cycling through your deck. And finally, at number 1, we have Royal Magical Library. This card was basically made specifically for FTK strategies, as what it does is each time a spell card is activated, you place 1 spell counter on it. Then, as many times you want per turn, you can remove 3 spell counters from this card in order to draw 1 card from your deck. So all of the cards we talked about previously, which only allow you to go card neutral and draw 1 card from your deck, turn into a free card draw every 3 times you do that. So 1 Toon Table of Contents is a +1 if you have Royal Magical Library on the field. 3 Upstart Goblins gives you a +1, 3 Into the Voids, 3 Chicken Games, etc, etc. In fact, Royal Magical Library is so good for these strategies, people will generally play ways in order to get this card out as soon as possible in FTK decks as well. If you're playing Mythical Beast Medusa, you can get Royal Magical Library on the field if you find a way to get into the graveyard, since Medusa can special summon it from the graveyard pretty easily. You can also use Reese Map in order to search the card from your deck if you happen to draw it in your opening hand, or you can even use Summoner Monk to get it out from the deck. And you can also play other cards that turn out more copies in the field, since none of its effects are once per turn. You can technically have 3 copies of Royal Magical Library on the field and keep drawing cards pretty much every time you activate a spell card at a certain point. So FTK decks like to play stuff like Double Summoning just to get 1 more on the field, or Trismegistus to special summon it from the hand, and Mythical Beast Medusa and Monster Reborn to get it from the graveyard. Royal Magical Library is so good for drawing through your entire deck that's the reason why Memories of Hope is only numbered 20 on this list, because you kinda want to use your summons in order to bring out Royal Magical Library. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other FTK cards we may have missed, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments below.
It's almost time for dinner. What do you want to eat?
I want to watch this video about the differences between Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering by the Manalogs of the YouTube channel TheDuelLogs Manalogs.
Okay, that's nice. We can watch that while we eat. Do you want macaroni or mashed potatoes as a side?
Wow, did you know due to the difference in resource mechanics, Magic has a hand trap that requires you to discard 1 card from your hand to negate in a similar manner to Ash Blossom, and it's so strong it's banned in multiple formats?
Didn't the therapist tell you to stop ignoring me and talking about duellogs all channels?
Man, it's crazy how MTG doesn't have a concept to negate boss monsters like Barone. The system of the game just doesn't really support building up a strong board of monsters.